Hi everyone, and welcome to today's writing lesson. This is our second one looking at narrative and building on yesterday's work with speech. I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who sent in work yesterday. It was great seeing your sentences really nicely corrected and edited. Plus we had a really good giggle at some of the videos you sent in of the drama starters. So to start today's lesson, we're just going to have a quick recap of how you actually put speech marks in, and I'll also give you a link to find out more information about that if you need. So let's have a look at a short video.
Duck. Every time you write the actual word someone says, you need to use speech marks before and after the words that are spoken. The spoken bit always starts with a capital letter. Even if it isn't at the end of a sentence, speech always ends with punctuation before the closing speech marks. If the sentence continues after the speech, put a comma before the closing speech marks. Don't just write said all the time. Try different verbs to describe how somebody is speaking. And if the speech is a question, put in a question mark. Yeah. If the speech is a command or shows strong feelings, use an exclamation mark.
Right, so still can't remember where the commas go, the inverted commas. Well, I've got a couple of ideas here that you could go and have a look at. All right, so if you're doing this in school, teacher could click on the images here or here, and it would take you to these two guides and you can go and have a look. If you're at home, if you go to BBC Bite Size, Key Stage 2 English, you can get to this area. It says guides, there's lots of information there, videos, all sorts. Or if you want to see another kind of lesson like the one I'm doing, if you go to Oak Academy, Key Stage 2 English Grammar, there's a part here, so you follow your way through and you find this lesson where there's a lovely young lady who is explaining how to use speech marks, if you're still struggling with it. Right, moving on. So to start off, we're going to have a little look at why is this piece of writing a wabble. So I'm going to give you it bit by bit and see what you notice as we go through. Oi, what are you doing, boy? Asked the funeral driver. Nothing, replied Alex. You shouldn't be snooping around here, said the funeral driver. I'm looking for my uncle's car, replied Alex. What kind of car is it? Asked the funeral driver. A silver BMW, said Alex. Well, we don't have any of those, said the funeral driver. I'm sure you do, said Alex. We don't, shouted the funeral driver. If you notice, that is all talk and no action. Nothing actually moving on, nothing happening. They're just talking back and forth. So if you want to pause and read back through that again yourself, you'll get quite bored because it's just talking to each other. So yes, it's great that we now know how to use speech and speech marks, but we're going to put this skill into practice alongside some extra bits of description and dialogue to really move the action forward. So, as we said earlier, we are continuing with our objective. We're still using dialogue to advance narrative action. By the end of the week, we're going to write our own version of the fight scene at the Breakers Yard, so building up to that. But to do that, we first need to make sure we know how to use speech and these action sentences together to advance the dialogue. Can't just use one or the other. You need to kind of go together to really make it flow. So similar vocabulary as yesterday, we have dialogue, inverted commas, speech, But today we've also got description, which means to give an image to the reader of what's actually what's there, what they can see. Action is what is happening, and generally things moving about. And dialogue, again, is so important. We need to focus on what's actually going on, describing it to the person reading. So much I put it on there twice. Right, so this is another little starter for you. You can pause the video in a second, and I'd like you to write a short description of the crane operator, driver from the funeral, and the scrapyard worker. If you can't picture them in your mind's eye, you can't imagine them, I've got 3 pictures here that you can use. So we've got the crane operator over here, the driver from the funeral, and a scrapyard worker. So just write down a few sentences. You can make a little mind map, you could draw your own picture of them, and just get lots of really good ideas. You could have adjectives, you could have little sentences, some similes might be great, up to you, metaphors, whatever you fancy. Off you go. Brilliant. So just going to show you a couple of quick ideas that I had. You could have had things like an enormous fat man with sweaty overalls on, he's obviously working hard. For the funeral driver, I've got a slender, slick-looking shadow of a man. And for our scrapyard worker, I've put a grubby and grumpy worker who is always busy with work. He hasn't got time to stop. So great. If you've got anything written down, keep it. It's going to be really useful later on. Okay, so this is my turn, and I'm going to show you something called a da-da sentence. D-A-D-A. So you have some description. You then have action, you then follow that up with some dialogue, and then some more action. All right, and these come together to really make a sentence flow, especially when something's happening, something exciting. We're going to focus on the crane operator for this, and Alex. So, description to start with, I'm talking about Alex now, he found himself face to face with the enormous man in overalls who he'd seen operating the crusher earlier. So I've used a bit of description from our idea earlier, from our starter, and we've just described what Alex has seen. We're going to move on to an action now, as the next part of our sentence. Alex realised the need for action and neutralised the threat with a swift uppercut. So I've described it, then I've said what's happened. Now I'm going to have my speech, some dialogue. "Take that!" he yelled. Now I could stop there, but you can add a little bit more action on the end, like this, as the big guy crumpled to the floor. So I'm going to read the whole thing as one now, and you'll see how nicely it flows. He found himself face to face with the enormous man in overalls who he'd seen operating the crusher earlier. Alex realised the need for action and neutralised the threat with a swift uppercut. "Take that!" he yelled, as the big guy crumpled to the floor. So can you see that it just flows nicely? Having a bit of description, action, and the speech all together really brings that action scene together as one. Okay, for our turn, I'd like you to have a go and see if you can complete the dada, description, action, dialogue, action, to write a little narrative between Alex and a scrapyard worker. So I've given you a couple little hints and starts to it, and also where the inverted commas would go. But when you have a little go at filling in the gaps yourself, use the one I just did as a real good structure and just change a few bits if you want to, or make your own, that's absolutely fine. So pause the video and have a little go at that now. Okay, brilliant. Keep those because they'll be really useful in a bit, but you could have had something like this. So Alex found himself trapped by the pale, creepy funeral driver. He quickly realised the need for action and made a break for it. "Leave me alone," he screamed, as the driver and his henchmen chased after him. So I just tweaked a few bits from that one before. Didn't have to go too crazy with it. But again, if you do it next one, you can add a bit more to it, especially with the description at the start. You can add a bit more in there. Again, look back through the lesson and you'll see the little bits you could borrow and you could magpie. So, for Chili 1 and your turn, again, I'd like you to have a go at making your own one of these dadas. Description, action, dialogue, action. So, for Chili 1, complete this one between Alex and a scrapyard worker. Now, I've got some starters in there, so I've given you a bit more of a start of the sentence. You can change that if you want to, but keep that structure. So you've got a description part, then action, then dialogue, then action. So keep that structure. Have a go at that one. If you finish it, you can challenge yourself to continue this scene with your own sentences using the da-da, D-A-D-A. For Chili 2, I'm going to modify this one. I've only given you a few little bits to write a narrative between Alex and the scrapyard worker. Again, challenge yourself after you finish that to write your own ones. This is up to you. Try and magpie a bit of mine if you want, but you can make your own completely. You could go back and look at the chapter of the book in our reading lessons. You could, if you've got the book yourself, you could have a little look as well and steal some ideas. Or you could just pause and go and back to your notes on the characters to get some description bits from there. So have a little go at that one. And Chili 3 just says, create a dada narrative between Alex and a scrapyard worker. So I've not given you any structure for this one. I want you to have a quick remember of what we did earlier and go and make your own description, follow it up with an action, add in some dialogue, see if you can maybe sneak an adverb in there maybe as well, ones we might have collected, or you could have had a different said kind of verb. So just kind of tweak it a little bit, see if you could sneak in some similes, metaphors, personification, really get that description going. Again, I'm going to leave this open to you a little bit. And if you wish to, the challenge is also to continue your scene with your own sentences. So you can start building your own idea of what you would have written in this part of the story. So have a little go at that. Brilliant. For self-assessment today, I obviously can't give you any answers because it's your own work. It's whatever you want to write. Obviously, I'll give you the email address in a bit and you can send in your work. But to self-assess, read this work to someone else. We've talked about this lots of times. Reading your work out loud really helps you to understand how it flows and if you then spot any mistakes. So read it to someone in the house, read it just outside loud to yourself. If you're in school, read it to the person next to you. But also check, have you got your inverted commas in place, in the correct place? So the outside of what you need them. Have you used the correct punctuation? Is it inside of the inverted commas? And does your writing flow nicely? Have you got some description, then action, then dialogue, then action? Does it flow nicely? Or is it like our wabble, where it's but? Have a little think to yourself. Does it read nicely? And last thing is just to say, well done. You've worked really hard today and can't wait to see your little bits of writing. It'd be great to kind of see the things you've coming up with and how you would advance them with a little bit of speech and some description. As always, send your work into the Year 6 email address and please send in your writing or pictures of it if you want to. Some people have actually typed it up on an email and sent it in, which is brilliant. We look forward to seeing them and I'll be giving out some dojos via email, but also hopefully doing some shout outs in our next lesson. Okay, have a lovely day. It's been great teaching you and I will see you tomorrow.